Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. Thank you for joining us for this technical assistance webinar, introducing the recently released Delta Workforce Program Grant. Our request for proposals. With everything going on with COVID, I wish we could do this in person, but we're doing the best we can to create, some content and create training and technical assistance opportunities in ways that we can serve you and get this information out as quickly and as best as we possibly can. So today we're going to cover the major elements of the funding opportunity announcement for the third round of the Delta Workforce Grant Program. And this is a really fluid, very informal webinar today. If you have any questions, you can dump those in the chat feature. I also think you have the ability to raise your hand or do anything like that. And if you're so moved, feel free to stop us and we're happy to ask any questions that you may have. But with that, I will turn it over to our fearless leader, Kent Morgan, for some introductions and some welcomes.
Hey, thanks, Ari. And I want to thank everyone for always being attentive to my emails that go out, and just want to get the right information in y'all's hands so that you can help your constituents always. So I'm not going to linger on too long, so I'm going to turn it over and let this get started. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Kip. As Kip mentioned, my name is Ari Kangelis. I'm a program manager with DRA, and I would also like to introduce my colleague, Alex Holland, senior advisor here at DRA. We'll be guiding you through today's presentation. Again, if you have any questions, submit those in the chat feature, raise your hand, or like I said, if you feel so moved, please feel free to speak up, and we're happy to answer any questions as we go throughout today's presentation. So for the next 15 minutes or so, Alex and I will give you a brief introduction to the 2021 Delta Workforce Grant Program, including award and eligibility information. Next, we'll take a deeper dive into the 2021 RFP, highlighting important sections and scoring criteria. Along the way, we'll be providing examples of how successful round one and round two DWP applicants incorporated one or more of the eligible activities into their proposal. And before we close, we'll again have time at the end for some Q&A to address any questions you may have. And we'll leave you with some additional resources in ways that you can connect with us throughout the application cycle. And with that, I will turn it over to Alex.
Thanks, Ari. I just want to give everybody a high-level overview of the Delta Workforce Grant Program. This slide here shows you our funding availability as well as the award ceiling and award floor. If you participated in applying through either round one or round two, you'll notice a slight difference in this program. While we're going to dive deeper into what the funds can actually be used for, the purpose of this program is to align our workforce development solutions with existing economic development strategies, as well as cross-sector partnerships in order to promote new sustainable job opportunities and long-term economic vitality in our communities that have been affected by the pandemic, that have been affected economically by industry closures, by industry dislocations, and generally to assist those that are job seekers, workers, new entrants to the workforce who are looking to skill up and create long-term high-quality careers for themselves. There is $1.5 million available for this program, so it is a lot smaller than the Workforce Opportunity for Rural Communities program that you are all probably familiar with by now through the Department of Labor. It's a collaborative program with Department of Labor as well as the Appalachian Regional Commission. But the purpose of this program is essentially to complement that. It's also to meet the needs of smaller organizations that might not need as much funding, or that might want to prepare to submit an application for a program through the work grant in the future. That small change I mentioned previously, that award ceiling is now at 200,000. It used to be 150,000. And our award floor is at 50,000 now. That used to be 25,000. So we have a slight adjustment in that range for this program. The other piece I want to address briefly is the technical assistance offered. So all of you as local development district staff are participating on this webinar right now. We're also going to have a webinar tomorrow for the public. We wanted to give you guys a sneak peek before everybody tomorrow. We also provide post-award technical assistance for successful applicants. So that means working with them through the life of the project. That doesn't just stop there though for successful applicants. We also work with those who are not funded to run them through their application, to explain what might make a more competitive proposal in the future. We believe that's also a really crucial part of the technical assistance that we offer. So this is something that we introduce on all of these technical assistance webinars, but just getting started. We want everybody to visit dra.gov/workforce. You'll be able to download the RFP there. So if you haven't already done that, please do so. There's also a lot of really great resources on that page as well, from not only this year, but previous years. Review that RFP in full. There's also some required attachments that you'll notice. Review our FAQs that'll answer some of those questions that we get about the program, and we already have those loaded up. And then also we have a new portal this year, and that'll be introduced later in the presentation. It is still the same link, workforce.dra.gov. You do need to register for an account before you can apply, but those are the first few steps in getting started for the program. Just some logistics here. You need to submit your application by October 27th, no later than 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Because this is a new application portal, we can't speak to how it will do the last day. If you're familiar with grants.gov, you know it's not good to submit your application on the very last day. Things can come up. So we urge you to submit those a couple days earlier. If you're working with any of your constituents, please encourage them to do the same thing. We will not accept hard copy applications. They will only be accepted through the portal. And Ari, I'll hand it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. So getting into a little bit more of the meat of the proposal itself. So DWP takes a long-term view toward assisting eligible communities in diversifying their economies by investing in local strategies developed by regional partnerships. As mentioned, the goal of the grant opportunity is to create a more vibrant economic future and gainful employment opportunities for eligible residents in the DRA region, enabling them to remain and thrive in these communities. DWP supports projects that develop or enhance cross-sector collaboration, deliver specific workforce services meeting identified local or regional needs, create or expand workforce training programs addressing high-quality employment opportunities, and support the delivery of quality, innovative training and workforce services. Again, here's just to rehash the award amount and type, and just, and I'm sure all of you are probably aware of this from previous years, but this award will be managed and be provided in the form of a grant. The period of performance for these grants will be no more than 24 months. It begins following an official notice to proceed, and that 24-month period of performance includes all necessary implementation and startup activities. And by the way, if your organization that you're working with is successful, all notice to proceed will be issued on the same day. And so we're going to, in the award documents, we'll include a specific date that all of the necessary and required contracts and associated documentation will need to be submitted back to DRA by a specified date, so we can get all all of these new awardees kicked off on the same timeline. So here is a kind of an initial list of eligible applicants. This list is not exhaustive. If you are interested, a full list of the eligible entities can be found on page 6 of the RFP. So among eligible applicants listed on the previous slide, the applicant agency or organization must also demonstrate collaboration or engagement with at least one employer or industry partner, and should partner with other organizations serving the economic, workforce development, and other needs of the community that the applicant proposes to serve. Applicants are also required to demonstrate that they will serve eligible participants who live in the DRA region. So this program requires a 15% cost share or match by non-DRA sources, and applications that demonstrate leverage resources from private entities or employers are highly encouraged for this program. And just to note, that 15% cost share match can be either cash or in kind. Only one application from each organization or eligible applicant will be considered for funding. If multiple applications are received from the same organization, only the most recently received application will be considered for funding. And while only one application will be considered, applicant organizations can be included as a partner on other organizations' applications. So allowable grant activities for this program include supporting industry-led workforce training, building collaborative talent pipelines, supporting or enhancing industry clusters, or accelerating local or regional economic development. We'll give a brief overview of each, along with examples of how each of these activities were incorporated into a successful prior year application. So first, supporting industry-led workforce training. Applicants should engage local or regional industry partners to understand their ongoing and evolving needs to develop or expand workforce training programs that address the skills gap that is preventing these employers from filling vacant positions or expanding their operations. So an example of an applicant from our 2020 cycle was Missouri State University, their West Plains campus. They submitted an application to purchase equipment to expand their robotics program for industrial technology. This was in partnership with 3 regional and partners there in the West Plains area. And like I said, this was meeting a specific identified workforce need in the manufacturing sector in Southeast Missouri. So building collaborative talent pipelines. Applicants should develop collaborative partnerships between K through 12 education systems, institutions of higher education, workforce training partners, and local or regional industry partners to sustain a talent pipeline that meets the current and future workforce needs of employers in high growth sectors. So while this was not a Delta Workforce Program grantee, this applicant was actually from Work. We think this is a great example from 2019 and like to highlight this one. Basecamp Coding Academy in Water Valley, Mississippi. Many of you are probably familiar with their program, but through Work, they were able to expand their training opportunities, expand their own programming, but also partner with, I believe it's Northwest Mississippi Community College, through an expansion of a program there in a new building called Everest, where they were actually able to develop a satellite campus for the community college there on site. So that's a great opportunity of building those collaborative relationships between the eligible applicant and a higher education provider. But supporting or enhancing industry clusters. Applicants should assess industry clusters, which are groups of interrelated industries that drive wealth and job creation in a particular area that exist in their region, to create or expand workforce training programs that address the skills gap that exists in these high growth industries and strengthen the economic competitiveness of the region. This is a really interesting program that we like to highlight. The University of Holy Cross in New Orleans, they actually develop a new program, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is only one or one of two in the country, but it's a program they called Food Science Culinology, which essentially is a next step above many of the traditional food science programs you see at two-year institutions. They created a higher education partnership with specific matriculation and credit transfer, to where students coming out of food science programs at two-year institutions could go at the University of Holy Cross and enter this culinology program and work with a lot of the advanced manufacturing sector and food development firms that are there in the New Orleans region. And this was a fascinating program that we were excited about and really excited to fund. But this is just an example of being able to support an industry cluster, or a program that supports an industry cluster there in a region that obviously has a unique competitive advantage in something like food manufacturing, and then the food systems there in the region. And accelerating local or regional economic development. Applicants should assess existing data and studies informing local and regional economic development priorities to ensure that proposed projects advance local or regional economies. And one project that we're proud of, Apprenti, Louisiana, through the Research Park Corporation. They've been a successful applicant in both 2019 and 2020, and they're continuing to expand capacity and outreach and apprenticeship programs in IT-based in the IT sector. And they have continuously expanded and looking to partner with new employers and industry partners and take on additional parishes, primarily in Northwest Louisiana, but also continuing to work further south and into the eastern part of the state as well. So now that we've given a brief introduction to the RFP and successful 2019 and 2020 project examples, we're going to transition into a section-by-section discussion of the RFP and review the requirements and contents of a competitive proposal. And before I start, does anybody have any questions? Perfect. We're doing a wonderful job, Alex. So as a reminder, applicants must serve workers in one or more of the following three targeted categories: new entrants to the workforce, dislocated workers, and/or incumbent workers. And we've already been through these, but just as a reminder, here are the allowable grant activities. And here is the scoring criteria for the 2021 Delta Workforce Grant Program. So for this program, the project narrative must demonstrate the applicant's capability to implement the grant project in accordance with the provisions of the RFP. It must provide a comprehensive framework and description of all aspects of the proposed project. It must be succinct, self-explanatory, and well organized so that reviewers can understand the proposed project. The project narrative is comprised of 5 sections listed here, totaling 100 possible points. The project narrative must describe all planned activities and their implementation, describe how planned activities address the needs and challenges described in the statement of need, describe how planned activities address the skills gap in the proposed area, meet employers' documented needs, overcome challenges to serve the target population, and ensure project activities are described in the budget narrative. And with that, I will turn it over to Alex.
Thanks, Ari. So for this year's program, again, if you're familiar with the previous years, you'll notice that we're now taking a scoring criteria that is a total of 100 points. In previous years, it was a total of 75 points, and we were able to kind of spread these out across the sections to show a greater priority on some of these subsections. So please pay attention to that as you're either preparing your application or working with constituents to prepare their application. But project information section is 60 points. It is the bulk of the points allocated towards your application. That includes your project description at 25 points, your project rationale at 25 points, and then your project team and relevant experience, 5 points, local and regional collaboration, 5 points. I'm going to go into each of these sections individually in just a minute, but just wanted to show you that breakdown so you can kind of see how the points are allocated and prioritized. So for the project description, we break this down further into 4 different subcategories here. You'll see the points on the screen. Again, this is something that you should pay attention to as you're developing this portion of the application, because it breaks down almost in the form of a checklist what you should be including in your project description. So the first thing I'll address is the description of project service area and community needs. That is 7 points. Essentially in this section, this is where you provide the bulk of your community data. So you need to describe the project service area, those community needs, and that target population that you will be serving by your proposed project. So Ari briefly mentioned the types of eligible participants being dislocated workers, incumbent workers, and new entrants to the workforce. That generally covers any participants you'd likely have in your program, but please call those out specifically. Who are you serving? Not just the service areas demographics, but even more specifically, who are those people that you'll be serving? In this section, you should describe service areas, socioeconomic and workforce challenges. So let's just say the unemployment rate is high. Please bring that up. We even call out median household income, labor force participation rate. And then lastly, you should also describe how the applicant, whoever that be, whether that be your organization or another organization, plans to recruit the target population. This is hugely important. It's not enough just to say we plan to serve these participants, but how are you actually going to conduct the outreach, especially if you're looking at underserved populations or those that might be disenfranchised in any sort of ways, those that might be part of a reentry program. How are you actually going to get in touch with those folks and serve their needs? Lastly, and perhaps the most important thing we need to do is describe the specific workforce needs of local or regional employers that you're partnering with. Again, as well as those job seekers and workers, if they're part of your target population, and how their needs are addressed by your proposed project. So that's a lot of information. That is worth 7 points and has its own question on the application. But perhaps the most important part of this section is the project design. So the project design is worth 15 points. It is the bulk of this section here. This is going to be a description of your approach for addressing those identified needs of the service area, as well as your participants' employers that you described in the previous section. And so this describes all of your grant activities. how you're going to implement the proposed workforce development program. And I will say this section is the easiest to describe incoherently. And I say that because you want to make the section really easy for the reviewer to get an understanding of the need that you're addressing and how you're addressing it, how you're actually going to implement your program in a way that's not kind of going all over the place. It really needs to be in a coherent fashion. It needs to seem feasible, and there needs to be a direct connection to those needs that you described previously. So all of this should also be reflected in your work plan, your project timeline, and then of course your budget and budget narrative. One special thing I'll call out here in this section is that we do want you to address anything that could impact your project success with some sort of contingency plan. This can be brief. We just want you to make mention. For example, a pandemic hit us last year. Knowing that, and that the realities are that we still have variants going around. If your training program is in person, perhaps you would address some sort of virtual component should you have to shut things down. Anything else even beyond COVID that could be impacting your program. We just want to know that you have some contingency plans and can implement this program in a timely fashion. The next two pieces, all you need to do if you are in a qualified opportunity zone, just mention that you're in an opportunity zone, or if you're in a persistent poverty county or parish, that's just where your program is servicing. So it's a service area. If you've got either one of those things, you get a point. It doesn't hurt you necessarily. If you're not in those, you just won't get those points. Okay. So that was the project description. So moving on to the project rationale, which is, there's actually a typo on this slide, but it is 25 points, not 15 points. You'll notice again, the section is then broken out into 4 different sections here. So also a very important part of your application. The most important piece here is that description of workforce needs. So the idea here for this program, of course, is that we're actually serving the needs of employers and job seekers and workers alike, right? But we need to get an understanding of what those industry needs are. So this section should describe, again, the skills gap of the local and regional employers that you're going to be partnering with. How are you meeting their needs? How is this training going to fill jobs that are available? Perhaps this is a company that can expand. If they had certain types of workers, what are those skills that they need? What are the credentials that they need? How will the training then address those needs in your community? So that is the description of workforce needs. The last 3 bullets that you'll see on the screen here, I think, are your gimme points, because this is where you describe alignment with DRA's strategic investment goals. So those are in the regional development plan 3. There's also alignment with the DWP investment priorities, objectives, and funding principles. You have to align with each one of those. They each have individual priorities, individual objectives, and individual funding principles. And we'll show those on the screen here in just a minute, but I just want to make mention that it doesn't have to be every single one of those sub priorities, sub objectives, and sub funding principles, but you do have to show alignment with each. The last thing is alignment with the local workforce or economic development priorities. So that might be for all of you, your comprehensive economic development strategy, if you're able to show alignment with that. Perhaps it's the WEO estate plan, perhaps it's another economic development plan that might exist in the area. We just want to make sure we are collectively as a community moving towards a collective goal and meeting those workforce needs. So this is the plan that I referenced, and all of you should be pretty familiar with this plan. But again, describing how your project meets or aligns with one of these three goals here. Improve workforce competitiveness is the obvious one. Strengthen infrastructure and increase community capacity. I will note that one mistake that has been made in past years is that you just have a sentence, or an applicant just has a sentence that says, my project aligns with DRA's, RDP 3, doesn't explain how. This isn't something that you need to spend, multiple paragraphs on, but it does need to be more substantial than just claiming that your program aligns with one of these goals. Take a look in this plan. You'll notice under the goals, there's a ton of sub goals. You want to even mention how maybe your program is supporting, any work-based learning models or apprenticeships or whatever might be included under that section. That's an easy way to do that. This is the DWP priorities, objectives, and funding principles. So if you hadn't read the RFP, now this probably makes a little more sense. So the investment priorities we've mentioned several times because they're also a way for us to explain those eligible activities for this program. But in this section specifically, you will need to call out how your project supports one or more of these investment priorities, or excuse me, aligns with one or more of these investment priorities. You will also need to do that for the objectives, and the objectives that we have here for this program include job placement. That is obviously what we're trying to do. We don't want to just train people to have them trained. We want them trained for careers. Career development is the next objective that we have here. So not only are we training workers to take a job, but again, we want these to be high quality and hopefully high paying careers for them, whether they be new entrants to the workforce or they be late in their current careers. And then lastly, our last objective is strategic investment. And so we just want to make sure these resources are being put into programs that will be effective and sustainable. So again, being able to show alignment with that will also help your proposal. And this might include not only demonstrating that you're investing in maybe high growth industry sectors, but maybe you're in a qualified opportunity zone or you're in a persistent poverty county. We also are trying to support those communities that might be a little more underserved. Lastly is the funding principles. The funding principles that we have are nearly the same as they were in past years. I think maybe we had a couple of word changes here and there, but market analysis is the first one. We just want to make sure that you're able to not only assess your labor market in the service area that you are targeting, but also how is your program then going to support that. So it's really an evidence-based program. That's what we want to see in that funding principle, that you've done your due diligence and you know the needs that you're serving. The next funding principle is collaborative. So that means that you are developing those cross-sector partnerships. So that might include your K through 12 system, institutions, higher education, other training providers in the area, employers. And I don't want to leave without mentioning wraparound service providers. If you are trying to serve harder hit populations, one example that's been used for the work program in previous years has been those that are suffering from substance use disorder. We need to make sure you actually have the resources to support that population so they can get through their training program. Another piece might be assisting those with transportation who might not have transportation, so that again they can actually get to their program and also return home. The last two, we've got evidence of leverage. Ari already mentioned that we do have a 15% cost share requirement. That can be cash, that can be in kind, it can be a combination of both. But we also want to make sure that you actually have that commitment from your local and regional employers or other partners that might be in the area. Show us how you are leveraging other public and private resources along with DRA's funding and those that you might have. And then lastly, outcome driven. Cannot overstate this, but realistic and attainable outcomes will be something that we are looking for and the reviewers are looking for as they're going through these applications. So both short and long-term objectives. Realistic is the key word. We'd rather see that you're going to train 25 people than train 1,000 people, knowing that you might be in a small community. We understand the impact that might be, so don't feel like you have to overstate those outcomes. All right, project information. To close out this 60-point section, we've got two other pieces that we're looking at. One is the project team and relevant experience. So this is where you're going to show those folks who are going to be working on this project. You don't need to mention every single person who are the most involved individuals in the project that are going to be administering it, whether it be the training, the wraparound services, the coordination of the program. We're going to want to see those key staff resumes, or if you are proposing to hire as a result of this program, please make sure that you attach job descriptions so we can take a look at those. That is required, just so you guys have that note, those staff resumes or job descriptions. For the next section there, we've got local and regional collaboration, again, 5 points. We want to see that you have other public and private partners in the area that are serving as part of this project. So 4 full points, we need to describe the role of the partner as well as responsibilities that they may have in any leveraged resources, again, whether that be cash in kind or any other leverage resources. An example might be if an employer is committing one of their employees to maybe work in some sort of training program, or perhaps they're providing some sort of mentorship services. That would be something that you might want to mention. That would be in that other category.
Thanks, Alex. So the next section is the anticipated project outcomes, which totals 10 points. The 2 scoreable criteria here are demonstration of realistic and attainable outcomes, which is 5 points, and then demonstration of specific and relevant outcomes, which is 5 points. As mentioned in the RFP, the applicant must provide specific, measurable, achievable, and reasonable project outcomes to be accomplished during the period of performance. To be considered for full points, the applicant must identify outcomes that align with the need, gaps, or challenges identified in the project description. And at a minimum, the applicant must include the number of communities served, the number of individuals trained, and the number of industry businesses served as anticipated project outcomes. The application will be scored on the extent to which the applicant proposes those realistic and attainable outcomes and provide specific and measurable outcomes to be achieved during the period of performance. And once again, just to reiterate what Alex said, we are much more interested in you, again, being very cognizant of what you can actually accomplish during the 24-month period of performance. We don't necessarily have to see hundreds and hundreds of individuals being proposed to be trained. Like Alex said, if there's 5, 10, 20 individuals that can achieve long-term sustainable employment opportunities as a result of this program, that is just as important to us as an application that can come in and say that they can can train hundreds of individuals. So we encourage you to be very realistic about the outcomes, and then also, as I mentioned, be specific about those outcomes. So the next section is the work plan, which is 10 possible points. 2 sections, the project deliverables, which are 7 points, project timeline, which is 3 points, The applicant must describe the task necessary to complete the project, including key personnel, the time period for completion, the deliverables, and the budget associated with each task. To be considered for full points, the applicant must provide a detailed work plan for the entire period of performance, which again cannot exceed 24 months. This year, for the application, we've actually created a spreadsheet, which in the application portal you will be able to download and then fill out this spreadsheet to develop your work plan and project timeline.
For the evidence of local demand and employer letters section, again, very, very important, and it has been since this program started a couple years ago. The first subcategory we have here is demonstration of workforce demand from local and regional employers. What this is referring to is the extent to which the applicant provides evidence of demand for skilled workers from local or regional businesses and high growth industries. This should be within the application, and it should be connected again back to those workforce needs that were described. Sometimes I think we have applications come through that describe a workforce need that then ultimately are not connected or addressed later in the application in terms of what the program is actually addressing. So just make sure there's some cohesiveness throughout the application for that. The other thing that makes this difficult, if that's not the case, is the evidence of employer engagement. So how are you addressing their needs? And you have to have letters of engagement from at least one local or regional employer. That letter shouldn't just be a carbon copy. If you have multiples, make sure they're different. But that needs to describe the employer's workforce challenges, including the specific skills gap that is going to be addressed by the project. And also, more importantly, how the employer intends to participate. That might be that they are assisting with the development of new curriculum. That might mean that they're providing staff to assist with on-the-job training for those participants. They might be wanting to get themselves involved in a registered apprenticeship program, which, you know, if those of you who have been part of those, you know that can be a process to become an official or certified RA program. Applications must include at least one of these letters. It can include multiple, but the application will not be considered without an employer partner on the project that addresses those key pieces, which is why that piece alone is 10 points. Getting down to the last component is the funding information. So for the first piece of this is the budget and budget narrative alignment. That will be 3 points. This is just to ensure that the budget, so your standard form, as well as your narrative, is consistent with project information and the work plan. Again, sometimes we see this as well, where an application might not mention certain activities. Then they'll mention a pretty large budget category in the narrative. If it's not mentioned, it's really hard for us to understand where the funding is going to. So make sure those are aligned and also consistent with your proposed project. So don't forget some of those smaller details. The next piece is the commitment of matching funds. Those are 2 points. Again, these are gimme points since that's a requirement of the application. But you do need to not only demonstrate that 15% of your total project cost is committed by those non-DRA funding sources or other leveraged resources, but you do need to attach a document that shows. So if you have a grant from another agency that you are using as match, you'll need to show that X amount of dollars are able to go towards this program or your proposed project. If you have any other outstanding resources, again, you'll just need to provide some sort of evidence that you actually have those resources and that they are committed for the duration of the project. So the requested attachments we've mentioned several times throughout this. Those employer attachments are those letters of engagement from employers, the verification of matching funds. What I just discussed was just making sure that you actually have those funds or other leveraged resources committed for your proposed project. Don't forget those key staff resumes. Again, sometimes it's just, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 people. It could be more than that, but just make sure those are your most important, your critical staff positions that you'll have coordinating and administering this project. If you're hiring, again, so this is only if applicable to your project, please include those job descriptions. Don't just say that you're going to, hire X position. We do want to see the job description. It shows that the project is, ready to begin. And in terms of the application review, so applications are going to be pre-screened. It's just a pretty basic eligibility review. Do you have all of the components of the application? Was everything filled out? Do you have those attachments? It's not necessarily digging into the application. These are typically, even though I said we're not digging into the application, the actual content, they're still pretty thorough. DRA, as you all know, we like to work with our applicants as much as possible. In any instance that maybe an application is incomplete, but something's minor, of course, we're going to be considerate of those things, but please make sure you have everything attached and filled out. Make sure you know that before the final day. These applications are going to be reviewed by a panel of 3. So every application gets 3 different reviewers, 3 different scores. Those are then scored individually against those elements that we just reviewed. That is in section F of the RFP. We don't know the total number of grants. It's varied from year to year. It's going to depend on the number of applications that are received as well as the amounts requested. But I think generally, we get anywhere from 10 to 14 applications that are then awarded. So again, all depends on those requested amounts. But now I'm going to turn it back over to Ari. He's going to go through the new application portal so you guys can get a feel for what that looks like. If you haven't already been in there, workforce.dra.gov, get registered so you can start to see the entire application.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. And as Alex mentioned, we've worked extremely hard to develop a new funding portal, and a quick shout out to our colleague Susan Edwards, who's on as well, and just to thank her for all her work in getting this up and getting this developed. This has been nothing short of a labor, but a labor of love. And so we're really excited about this new portal and look forward to everyone utilizing it in the coming, with the next few programs. So when you go to workforce.dra.gov, this will be your landing page. One thing I want to note, if you have any questions when you're trying to create an account, submitting your proposal, submitting your application, there are some wonderful tutorial videos right there on that landing page. You can see those right under the tutorials tab. They're not very long, but there's some great resources there in case you have any trouble. And just always know that you can reach out to us in case you have any issues with this portal, and we're happy to help. So but with that said, if this is your first time going to workforce.dra.gov and visiting the new portal, the first thing you're going to want to do is click that Create New Account button. And once you there's a couple different prompts there. Once you go through all those and create that new account, you'll be taken to your organization's dashboard. And this will be a dashboard that will hold all of your applications, all of your requests, all of your organizational information, including points of contact. It will all be there on your dashboard. And then you will select the Delta Workforce Program 2021 application to get started. And so here's a screenshot of what the new portal looks like, what the new application portal looks like. This is a very linear, very well laid out application. So you'll be able to go section by section. As you can see, they're somewhat broken out like drop downs, if you will. So there you'll start with the acknowledgements. You'll click the checkbox, and then you'll roll through the application. So as you can see, the next section's project information. You'll click that arrow and it will drop down all the relevant sections related to the project information, and then so on and so forth for project rationale, anticipated outcomes, and work plan. We had a lot of questions about this last year, and some folks having some issues with their application saving. So I hated getting phone calls from some of you saying, "Hey, I tried. I was halfway through my proposal. I went to click save, and I came back and nothing saved." So one of the beauties of this system this year is at any point during the development of your proposal, you can go down to the bottom of the page and hit save application. Once you hit save application, it will take you immediately back to your organization's dashboard page. And from there, this is what your dashboard looks like. And from there, you can immediately pick back up and start working on your proposal again. And so I saw a question real quick from Jody. If you're a current recipient of DRA funds, will the new account need to be created in the portal, or will the existing login information work? That's a great question, Jody. You will need to set up and create a new account in this portal. And so that is the new application portal. One of the things I want to note for you, you saw at the bottom of this slide here, you can either save or submit. Please be sure that when you are ready to submit your application, everything's complete. It's the way you want it to be submitted. That's when you'll need to hit submit application, because once you've hit submit, you cannot go back in and edit the proposal anymore. So make sure you save early and save often, but only hit submit after you're ready for DRA to review that application. And there are also some other interesting features of this portal as well. So up at the top right, you'll see a button that says application packet and question list. You can actually click one of those. I would actually encourage you to click the question list, and that will actually download a PDF with an outline of the entire application process. So you can actually go through and review section by section before you actually go into the actual portal itself and start submitting and start filling in the application. And that is all we have. That's all we have today. I guess we have some time for some Q&A. So I'll open it up now. Alex, if you want to make any comments or thoughts, but with that, I'll turn it over to Q&A, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Like I said, feel free to unmute yourself. You don't have to type in the chat box now. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask those now.
Ari got a question in the chat. How similar is the application process to Cdap? Do you want me to take that, or do you want to take that?
Go ahead, Alex.
So in terms of applying online through a portal, of course, that's probably the most similarity that it has to Cdap. I say that because the questions are very specific to a workforce development program. And so, in kind of walking through the scoring criteria and all of those different elements, all of the questions are connected to those elements that we just went through. And so this application might be just slightly longer than Cdap's application, but again, it's because there is just some additional questions that are more specific to workforce needs. We dig into your work plan and project timeline. The budget section is probably the most similar to Cdap. And then the required attachments that we have in terms of those key staff resumes, job descriptions, employer letters, the verification of matching funds. Some of those again are similar, some are not similar to Cdap. So that's it's kind of a loaded question, but hopefully that makes sense. And I think it'll make a little more sense once you log into the portal. Take a look at that. This process, I will say, is also different from Cdap in that if your constituents are applying, the applications are not going to then go to the LDDs for you guys have to go through those and essentially approve them and send them on to DRA. Everything comes direct to DRA, whether that's from all of you or your organizations or directly from constituents. So there's no additional administration required on behalf of LDDs. Ari, anything that you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Alex. Do we have any other questions? So just saw one, Heather, is the online portal the replacement, quote unquote, replacement for the workbook from last year's? Is there a mechanism in the portal to allow for the LDD to generate an application for a separate entity for submittal? Heather, that's a great question. I know, for instance, when setting up the organization, you can also create and establish multiple points of contact within each organization. So for instance, I believe, and Susan, chime in here because you've seen a little bit more of the back-end development side when it comes to the setting up organizations and setting up points of contact. Could, for instance, Heather, develop an application, for instance, for multiple organizations and be able to select which organization she's maybe working on an application for?
Yes, she can. She would set up her LDD as an organization and then create various points of contacts. She's working with a chamber of commerce or a nonprofit or whatever the entity is, and then she can assign specific grants to that entity and point of contact. So between the grant applications, only the people that are relative to that application can see the information. Not everyone that she's working with.
And Susan, as a workaround too, I know that this happens for other application portals or whatever. Could the other workaround be that an applicant who maybe has registered shares their login information with the LDD if that is necessary for any reason?
Yes, and I would say if anyone runs into any problems, this portal gives us the unique capabilities to make changes quickly in-house and through their support. They've been very responsive to all of our questions that we've had through this development process. So if you see something that's not working, just let us know at that workforce@dra.gov email address, and we can get the issue addressed and let you know that a change has been made or an update, and we can let everyone else know that too, because if you're experiencing an issue, there's a chance someone else is as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, hearing none, I just want to again, and I think Alex, you have to jump. Alex, thank you so much for being a part of today's presentation, and thanks for help. As always, thanks for your wisdom and guidance. Again, I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today. As Susan mentioned, if you have any questions about the portal, any questions about the RFP. So just saw a question come in, and Lynette, I'll address that real quick. Can the funds be used at a high school career training center to renovate building for a welding program? The answer to that question, Lynette is yes. We've actually done something similar through another program or another awardee, I believe, another grantee in 2019. So the answer to that is yes. And just to elaborate on that a little more, there is not a list of eligible activities or eligible expenditures per se in the RFP. I've gotten a couple questions about that. We have intentionally left it or left the RFP open to provide the maximum amount of flexibility to applicants to be able to propose unique and innovative ways to utilize the funding. So there is not a list of eligible activities per se, but obviously we want to see that the expenditures are in line with the demonstrated need and the skills gap that you're addressing, and how that expenditure is ultimately going to go towards alleviating or addressing that gap. One of the things I'll also mention, the FAQs, the 2021 program FAQs are on our website, dra.gov/workforce. They're listed under the 2021 resources tab. And there's a lot of, it expounds a little bit more on eligible activities and eligible expenditures in that FAQ. So if you all get a chance, please review those, and that may answer some more questions about eligible expenditures. So with that, again, thank you all so much for your time today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. The easiest way, you'll actually, if you email workforce@dra.gov. Sure, Lynette, it's dra.gov/workforce. And then if you have any questions, concerns during the development of your proposal, if you email workforce@dra.gov, you will actually get all three of us. So you'll be connected to Alex, Susan, and myself. We'll be able to respond to you pretty quickly. We've got a pretty quick turnaround time. If you email workforce@dra.gov, you'll get all three of us. So one of us will be able to address your question or concern. So with that, I love finishing on time. I thank you all so much. Kemp, did you have any final remarks before we finish for the day?
Nope, not me. Y'all did a great job.
Perfect. Thanks, Kemp. Thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciate you. And like I said, if you have any questions about the application process, please do not hesitate to let us know. And with that, I will end today's meeting and give you all back the rest of your day. Thank you so much.